Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at J More Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your questions and comments for our guest or myself into the comment box, and you'll see me turn my head check from time to time. Today's guest is the beautiful, feisty, charming Marisel Salazar. She is a bilingual Latin, New York City based food writer, restaurant critic, cook, and recipe developer for publications like The Michelin Guide, Zagat, Food and Wine, Wine Enthusiast, Thrillist, and many, many more. She is also the creator of the Michelin's Guide's popular column Eating Off Duty, what celebrated chefs eat outside their kitchens. And let's add to her resume, cookbook author as her new cookbook, which hits the shelves August 20th, Latinish, more than 100 recipes celebrating American Latino cuisines, hits the shelves. Aren't you prepared? There we go. There
That's
we
right,
go.
of course.
Hi, Marisol. We didn't have much time to chat prior to the show. So, what's on your plate today other than doing the show?
I mean, Dara, this is like our first date, so we're gonna get to know each other pretty well, I think. And thank
Mhm.
you for having me on the show. Thank you for everybody that is tuning in, and for the folks that tune in post the show. Feel free to reach out to me to ask me any questions from what you see or hear today. I'm not gonna lie, Dara, it has been such a crazy time with my debut cookbook, Latinish, coming out. It is my first cookbook. It is a one-of-a-kind cookbook, and it recently received Amazon's best cookbooks from their editor's picks for this month. So I was really proud and happy about that. And honestly, today is a whirlwind. I'm going to be going on book tour starting August 20th. And I know you're in Baltimore. Is that right?
I'm in Baltimore. They're coming to Washington, D.C. And I just want to tell everybody her website is mariselsalazar.com. Her book schedule, where the different cities she's going to be appearing in, will be there. Her whole history. I was telling Malazar very quickly, I have like 4 or 5 pages of notes. There's so much I can talk to her about, so much she's accomplished for her very young years. I am totally impressed. We're going to start talking about the cookbook, but I'd like to share a bit of background about my guest to my viewers, whether
Yes.
live or post, as you're saying. And you state that you are a culinary fusion. Can you fill us in on that comment? Why are you a culinary fusion?
I think I'll answer this in a couple of ways. One is a culinary fusion in terms of my ethnic background and where I've grown up all over the world, which influences the dishes that I create. And then the second way of being a culinary fusion is my professional background. But I'll start with the first. So, what do I mean by culinary fusion? I am originally from Panama. I was born in Panama City, and I moved to Hawaii as a little girl. I left when I was about, 4 years old, and I lived on a base in Honolulu, Hawaii. My family and I lived there for several years, and then we moved to Okinawa, Japan, which, for folks that don't know, is a tiny little island in the Ryukyu Island chain off the mainland of Japan. And we were there for about 4 years, something like that. Following Japan, I moved to what I call the real United States, the contiguous 48 United States. And I lived I spent my formative years actually in the DC, Northern Virginia area. So I grew up middle school, high school in Falls Church, Virginia. Was in and out of DC for my internships, first jobs out of college. So I'm very tied to the Delmarva area, which is why I was curious if you're in Baltimore, because we're kind of in a similar neck of the woods. Then I went off to school, and I went to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And just having grown up, moving around every 3 or 4 years, I started getting a little restless. So when I was about 20, 21, I decided to move to Madrid. And like any young person who goes to Europe, I was a total cliche, Dara. I came back so cultured, so enlightened, but honestly, it's really where I had my ratatouille moment. And I knew that's where I wanted to work in food and dedicate myself to food professionally for the rest of my life. I'll tell you, I was in this market called El Mercado de San Miguel, which is a famous quasi open air outdoor market, great for tapas, vinos, y pinchos. And I took a bite out of an anchovy stuffed olive, and that was like, it sent fireworks throughout my body. It was just a very sublime moment for me. The flavor was umami, briny, and that's what I call my ratatouille moment, because there was literally fireworks going off in my head.
And I have to say, I think because I watched a video, I'm going to get back to it. Your mother had said you were always a sweet person.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
That was in the video, and that was the Ropa Vieja, which I love that video. And
Yes.
we're gonna talk about that one. And I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but with you being somebody who tended more to the sweets, to bite into that olive, to get the briny, to get the
Yes.
salty, I can understand where that would go, I've been missing out on all this.
Correct. I mean, as I've gotten older, I trend more towards savory and salty than I do sweet. I think sweet is for the youth. And when I was young, I was a sugar addict. But that's what I mean by culinary fusion. I've grown up and lived in so many different countries and states around the world. I'm now based in New York City, where I've been for the past decade, minus a year-long stint in San Antonio, Texas recently. Everywhere that I have lived, being a global citizen has influenced the way that I cook and the recipes that I create. And even my upcoming cookbook, Latinish, is partially inspired by my upbringing. And the second way that I am a culinary fusion is the professional work that I do. I'm not just one thing. And genuinely, I am the only person that I know that does what I do and the extent of what I do. And what I mean by that is, not only am I a food writer and a restaurant critic, but I'm a professional recipe developer and cook. I am on camera quite frequently. About every month or so, I do something either on local television, national television, or digital segments. I'm a travel writer. And I really could never imagine not being all of these things, because each piece of my professional career and the different facets of it feeds into the other. And I think it makes it that much stronger. Is it exhausting? Absolutely. Is it exciting and thrilling? Yes. So that's what I mean by culinary fusion. Culinary fusion in terms of my background, all of the places that I lived, but also professionally, not just being satisfied with being one type of career professional in the food industry.
Well, I'm curious. When you were at Cornell, you hosted dinner parties at the Hillel House, was that something that you were cooking there, or just the hostess? Obviously, was it all kosher?
It was kosher, not like it was kosher to the extent of I've never mixed meat with dairy. And I never used dairy plates for meat plates in that sense. And I'll tell our audience, I'm not Jewish. I love the Jewish culture and the people. All of my best friends growing up have been Jewish. Some of the first things that I learned how to cook were Jewish food from my next door neighbor. His mom would teach me how to cook. And so when I was at school, and Cornell has the large Jewish population, the Cornell Hillel Society was also very welcoming to, I guess I'm called a Gentile, very welcoming to spreading the Jewish faith and community and the culture to folks like me. And I fell in love with that sense of community. So when they offered to help me throw Shabbat dinners for people, I jumped at the chance. And it was a really lovely, being allowed in a community that I wasn't born into.
Right.
So I would host and cook for 10, 12 people for these Shabbat dinners. And I really, really learned to love it. But it's also where I could really display and present all of my culinary prowess, or the types of food that I was interested in from my travels.
Right. Well, your book, I bring it up because in your book, you have a recipe that's more Middle Eastern, which was the roasted peppers and the walnuts.
The muhammara, yes.
Yes. And your cookbook, Latinish, basically talks about the each recipe has a story behind it and how it came to be. That there are regions uh, all around. It isn't just Tex-Mex and whatever for Latin food in America. This is
Correct.
American Latin food. It's not Latin food.
Correct.
And you give the story behind it. So one of the stories was about this. So there's mixed cultures. And when we think about Southwest food, I don't think the Americans, which brought to light in your recipe, that local Native American Indians, Navajo, Hopi, and Pueblo, basically influenced that Southwest Latin cuisine with the
Correct.
Mexicans. I'm going to just start telling everything that you should be saying,
Oh,
but
no, please.
that's what impressed me. I like a story, and let's go to the Ropa Vieja. Um, there are many, many videos that you've done. The one you did on it, it wasn't the Thrillist. I'm trying to think which one you did, Kitchen or whatever it
The
was. It was
kitchen?
the Kitchen.
Yes.
Cute, precious, entertaining, and you're making the Ropa Vieja and you're telling the story behind it, which is in the book.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden your mother comes in, and I think you had referred to your mother, even though she was a single mother and you could be in Japan, she was cooking Ropa Vieja in Japan and adapting. But she came
Yes.
on screen, and it reminded me of Julia Louis Dreyfus's Women of Age or something like that. That at the end of every episode, she talks to her mother, so that Mom, I just spoke to Ina Garten, blah, blah, blah. So it was very cute. So everybody, the website, MariselSalazar.com, look
Mhm.
at her videos.
Oh, thank you.
Informative, precious, cute, feisty, and I can understand why you've been so successful. I'm
Thank
just very enthused to have you here. So let's talk about the book, Latinish, more than 100 recipes celebrating American Latino cuisines. What was the genesis of this book? What was the idea, or how did the book come about?
It's really funny that you asked that because I was just at a dinner party last night that my really kind friend, Caroline Hatchett, she is a writer and an editor at Plated Magazine, threw for me on behalf of the book with some other fabulous New York City writers, journalists, and some food folks here. Uh, everyone was asking me that question. How did you come up with this idea? And it's not so much that I came up with this idea, Dara, because this food has existed for American Latino cuisine, is what I'm referring to, which is the food in the book, Latinish, is American Latino cuisine. This food, which, as you correctly say, is beyond Tex-Mex, has existed for, 50, 100, 200, 300 years. It's started with the Mexican migration in the United States. It started with the Spanish conquistadors coming to the US, and setting up Mexico and, what was once, a territory of Spain. This food is old. I didn't come up with it. It has already existed. I am just the first person to recognize, celebrate, and promote this type of cuisine because it really gets a lot of flack and a lot of people love to hate on American Latino cuisine. And I'll explain it in the sense of, everybody loves Tex-Mex. I don't care, what you think about it. It is darn delicious. And so many and thousands of other people like it. I mean, I'll tell you this story. I was in a supermarket in Finland, all the way in Finland, and I was looking at their food, their prepared salad aisles, and they had a Tex-Mex salad kit in a grocery store in Helsinki. And that just blew my mind. So, American Latino cuisine, vis-a-vis this example of Tex-Mex, also has an international branding and an international standing. And I recognize that each part of the United States, various regions of the United States, had their own specific sub-gastronomy of American Latino cuisine because of waves like migration waves, geopolitical events, pop culture, um, other types of influences, even weather has influenced American Latino cuisines. And it's all a very natural evolution of people and their ancestors who have come to the United States and the evolution of Hispanic cuisine in a way that is uniquely American. Folks love to say, like, oh, this isn't traditional Latin American food. It's not authentic. Well, no, of course not. It's not authentic to something that exists in a different country. This food exists in this country and it's authentic to itself. It's not pretending to be the old ways. And I really love to say that.
What are the definitive American Latino cuisines? 7 or 8 of them. Which ones are they?
Correct. So we have, okay, so you're in like the DC, Delmarva area. So, I mean, starting up to like, what do we call New England? There's New York Mexican, which we call Puebla York. There's New Yorican, which is New York Puerto Rican, Dominican American, Cuban American, all up in New York and New Jersey and the Eastern Seaboard. And then we find El Latino Sur, which is the Latin South, which is the confluence of the American South and Latino peoples. Then we have Floridian cuisine, which is down towards, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, what have you. And that's a confluence of Cuban and Caribbean peoples on American cuisine. Then we go to Tex-Mex, Texas and the surrounding areas, of course. We have the Southwestern cuisine, what you referred to earlier with the Navajo and the Hopi indigenous peoples. And then we have Midwest Mexican, which covers, Illinois, Ohio, that region of the United States. The we call it the bread belt. I'm trying to reference it to an American reference that we all know. In Chicago, there's a huge community of Puerto Rican. So we have Chicago Puerto Rican type of cuisine. Then, of course, we go to the Pacific Northwest and California. California in and of itself is a whole sub-gastronomy of American Latino cuisine, which we call Cali-Mex. They also have another offshoot of it called Alta California, which I can explain in a little bit. And then we go to Seattle and the rest of the Pacific Northwest. They also have their own versions of American Latino cuisine. It's really no matter where you are in the United States, you are bound to find some sort of confluence between American and Hispanic. And these have occurred naturally. They're not contrived. No one's trying to make, a new cuisine into existence. Right. It's what naturally occurs when you're influenced by your surroundings in a new country.
Well, we had certain chefs that influenced and brought things to light. Tex-Mex was Mark Miller, Floridian, Norman Van Aken for sure. And he's still going at it. I love him. He's fabulous.
Yes.
And
the Mango Gang is very important to Floridian cuisine as well. Is what
they're
called. Mango. It's a group of chefs known as the Mango Gang. Which, I talk all about it in the book. It's very fascinating.
Right. I remember you referring that. But what can I say? I got a million notes here and going. Okay, let's keep going. So let's see. Got the genesis of the dedication. In the book, I'm curious, you had a dedication thanking San Antonio who took you in and helped you heal.
Yes.
I'm just being nosy.
Please.
I could say curious. How did they help you heal? You said that you spent some time in San Antonio.
Yes, correct. I wrote the book in San Antonio for a couple of reasons. One, San Antonio is the birthplace of Tex-Mex. So it was really important to me that I be there also, to be able to travel to places across the South and the Midwest, like California, Austin, other, prominent cities in Texas. Fun fact, my sister lives there, so it was great to be with my sister and my family while I was living in San Antonio. So it was really lovely that it brought me closer. And also at that time, I was going through a really big personal life event that totally disrupted my life. It was really interesting at one of these points where it should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I had just gotten my cookbook deal. Something, equally, if not more terrible, happened. And when I went to San Antonio, I'd been living in New York for the past decade. When I went and took a break out in San Antonio to write this book, I was just really floored at how welcoming and warm Texans were, how welcoming and warm San Antonians were. And they really just welcomed me with open arms. And I think partially, one, that's just how they are. But two, I had such an enthusiasm and love for San Antonio already. The fact that it's a huge part of my book, but I also wrote about it for magazines like Condé Nast Traveler and other prominent publications. And I think they also really loved seeing an outsider take such a love and enthusiasm for
Right.
their city, which made them even more welcoming of me. So I really, really give San Antonio my whole heart, and there was no way I couldn't have my cookbook dedicated to it.
Now, were you there? You got the contract, you're in San Antonio. Was that just prior to COVID?
Oh, this was 2022 into 2023.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
we're over COVID, blah, blah, blah.
correct.
I'm so thoroughly impressed with you. Look, you come to New York City, it's a big city,
Yeah.
and it definitely is a city. It's who you know and who you connect with. And in order to have such success that you've had, to be on Thrillist, to be a judge for the James Beard Awards. I don't know what category it was because you're not doing it for all of them.
No, it's for New York State.
Okay, so you went to the restaurants?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, it's a friend of mine here did Mid-Atlantic for James Beard.
Fantastic.
Pardon me?
I said that's fantastic.
Yeah. The fact that you have weaved and made such a name for yourself is very impressive. I believe it is who you know and networking. What tools, what did you find worked best for you? I know you're a member of IACP. What other organizations are you part of?
So I'm a part of IACP, is the International Association of Culinary Professionals. I'm also a part of the Newswomen's Club of New York City, which is a private club for female journalists. And I'm also part of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And I really like, because I want to get into this, I really liked how you say it's all about who you know. When I came to New York City, I didn't know anybody professionally. I had a bunch of friends, my girlfriends, best friends from college. It was a great time, being in my 20s, young 20s, and partying. So I knew a lot of people socially, but in terms of the food world, I didn't know a single soul. And and it's not like I had any connections either. My family's not connected to New York City food or media industry whatsoever. So I really had to do it for myself. I had to create and build those connections. And how did I do it? I am a go-getter. I really put myself out there. I reached out to editors of magazines that I really enjoyed and wanted to write for, to ask them out for a cup of coffee. Back when that was a thing and people were more likely to do that with a total stranger. I reached out to chefs and restaurateurs. I became a regular at their places. I just embedded myself in the fabric of the New York City restaurant scene. And the more that my name became known, it was like big fish eat little fish. Bigger publications started reaching out to me to write for them instead of me pitching them. Brands, incoming brand deals from social media as my social media grew, on-camera television opportunities as more folks knew about my name, who I was, and what I was about. And I think that really comes from an openness and a willingness to hear other people's stories in a genuine and earnest way. I used to say that, especially when I interview folks, I'm just the microphone, you're the voice. And I find it really funny these days how more people are being the microphone for me. And now I get to be my own voice and tell my own story, even if it's through the lens of a wider gastronomic cuisine like American Latino cuisine in this book. And I find it incredibly humbling. And, again, to thank you for being my microphone today.
Well, my pleasure. We've talked about the book in general. There are some interesting recipes. Guava cream cheese cinnamon rolls. Now, this
Yes.
goes back to your original sweet tooth,
Mm-hmm.
but who's it? Cinnamon rolls. The Cinnabon.
Yes.
Cinnabon is probably what we're talking about. You went to
Correct.
the mall, that aroma, cinnamon, it draws you in. It's like, come
Yes.
here, come here.
Yes. It
Right.
permeates everything.
So now you have a guava cream cheese instead of regular cream cheese in there.
Correct.
I'm just giving people, as they say in Yiddish, a leck and a schmeck, a lick and a taste.
I like a schmeck. I like that.
Yeah, a leck and a schmeck. Just in case for all my Jewish friends who are watching. So we have that. You had Colorado burritos. What are Colorado burritos?
So, I suppose I should explain it in terms of this book. So, Colorado burritos there are a couple of things. One, they could just be burritos made by anybody in Colorado, using green chilies. They're most prominently known for being smothered. They're called smothered Colorado burritos, and they are these, oh my God, big, beautiful, juicy, cheesy burritos, usually filled with some sort of ground meat. Carne. The way that I call my Colorado burritos in my book was because of my mother's ex-husband, her second husband, who was from Colorado and really introduced my sister and I to Colorado-style Mexican food. And I remember even when we were living in Japan and in Hawaii, he would have his family send him monthly shipments of a very specific green chili that you could only get in the Colorado area. So he could make his Colorado green bean burritos. And I really loved those burritos. I mean, he is no longer in my life. He is out of the picture, God bless. But he really did impart, and expose me to this type of Colorado style of Mexican food, which was hugely influential on me. So I do state in the book, these are not the smothered red Colorado style burritos. This is a different version of a Colorado burrito that I grew up with using Colorado ingredients.
Just a couple more, but people, the book you can order on Amazon now, and all this information is up in the comments. And even if you can't figure that, you can spell MariselSalazar.com. Everything is there to connect to. Her Instagram is Marisel M.
Correct.
Salazar, because there's obviously more than one Marisel Salazar. So
it took my handle before I got to it.
I've never had that problem with Dara Bunjon. I have Googled. I am the only person that shows up with that name.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So there's Latino fried chicken. There's Philly cheesesteak quesadillas.
Yes.
And they all have a story behind them, whether it be the history. And that's to me, a cookbook is a novel. The recipes are great. I like the story. I like that header note to tell me something about it and engage me. So that is there for everyone. Another recipe I found fascinating was the Filipino dessert, the avocado, condensed milk, ice, and salt.
Yes.
That's one I sort of have to try. I'm curious. It's sweet. You have the texture of the avocado. The salt will bring out more flavor.
Correct.
Over ice. There was friends of mine had a Vietnamese restaurant here in town, and she used to take, it's sort of the same concept, but not. She would take crushed ice and put canned lychees over the ice with fresh mint. And in the summer, that was dessert. Same thing sort of over that crushed ice.
That sounds so lovely.
It is. It's simple. And my next dinner party, that's what's for dessert.
Oh, I love that. And it's simple, easy to eat, easy to make. I love that.
Right. And There was one of the videos. I mean, there's so much of you online that I just couldn't keep up with it. It's not in the book, but making an apple pie and letting the apple be the crust.
Yes, it's making an apple pie in an apple, and having a very small interwoven lattice over the top of a hollowed out apple filled with, you know, spiced cooked apples, a little bit of granola. It was just a very cute recipe that I was doing around the holidays, and it's really fun to do with kids. I do it with my nieces. And it just adds a little bit of like joy to a dinner table or a holiday gathering.
Right. I brought up Ropa Vieja. What is the story, the myth behind Ropa Vieja? I don't want to miss that.
Yes, it's so what Dara's referring to is a video that I did on a publications website called The Kitchen. Ropa vieja is a classic traditional Cuban dish. You can also find ropa vieja across other different types of Latin American cultures. It originally hails from Spain, but it was popularized in Latin America, specifically Cuba, and it means old clothes. Sometimes you'll see translation as old clothes, torn clothes. And
Right.
the reason it's referred to that is one, because of the story that I'll tell you about, the myth. And then the second is because of the cut of beef that we use to make the dish.
Okay.
So, ropa vieja is a shredded beef using either skirt steak. You can use different types of other, like the harder cuts of beef, because typically that's what the poorer people used. And it's stewed in a spiced tomato sauce, usually served over rice. And the legend, the myth of ropa vieja was there was once an old man who couldn't afford to feed his family. So he took off all of his clothes and he stewed them, and it turned into meat. And that's how he was able to feed his family.
Right.
And then the second one goes, there was once an old man who gave his clothes away in exchange for meat, um, in order to feed his family. And I like both of these, one, because they're fantastical, but two, it just really goes to show the extent and ingenuity that people will do when they're hungry, when they have limited resources. Some of the most
Right.
delicious dishes that folks have come up with historically across any culture have to do because of, living in poverty or really trying circumstances. I always like to say constraint breeds creativity, and, folks in tough times and tough situations really have done that. And that is very emblematic of what ropa vieja is. And it's, a national dish of Cuba, shredded stewed beef in a tomato sauce served over white rice. Let's have a couple of sweet plantains on the side, or plátanos. It's a really fantastic Cuban dish, and I highly recommend you check out my video and recipe on the kitchen if you'd like to try it out.
Just to remind people, Marisel Salazar. I mean, I can't even say it anymore. Salazar. Okay.
Oh, you got it.
Okay, we got that. .com. So you're a restaurant critic. I was speaking with someone else, Nevin Martell.
Yes, of course.
So Nevin does a lot of reviews. And I said to him, nowadays, I said, do you really feel like you're doing a review, or you're doing a story on the restaurant?
Correct.
So I asked you the question nowadays, are you going in that Gail Green type of concept, hidden, disguising yourself to do a review? Are you going in and writing a piece on the restaurant?
It's both. So the way that I describe it is a lot of my restaurant critique comes from non-writing angles, in the sense of, for example, my James Beard Award judge position. A lot of the way that I critique is through these private, behind the scenes positions. So like James Beard Award, I've done it for many magazines where I don't even get a byline for it. It's I go in and I try the food and I give my opinion to the staff, to the editor. And that gets built into, when you see bylines like from the staff of, or the X, Y, and Z staff, that's where
Right.
most of the critique comes in. I'm also of the opinion where, and it is helpful though too, I don't love to negatively paint a restaurant just because I know how difficult it is to even run a restaurant and the trials and
Ab-
tribulations. And there are
Absolutely.
already public forums for that, Google reviews, Yelp, where you can see a popular consensus. I am also very wary of trusting, and I say this, take this with a grain of salt. I'm very wary of trusting food critics, in the sense of, who are you? How can I identify with you? You're nothing like me. We come from different backgrounds. We have different tastes, physically amongst genders, male and females, taste and smell differently. So it's really hard for me to connect with a food critic who I can't see myself in their shoes. And I think that's the case for a lot of people too. And, in the past 50 or so years, there's really only been one type of food critic, and it's been, male, white, an older white male. And so it's really hard, I think, for a lot of people to connect with that. And very revered. Um, and I highly respect these people. But I think the age and era of what it means to be a food critic and a reviewer is changing, and it needs to become more diversified. And we can't just trust one person's opinion because, one person's opinion is not everybody's opinion.
And
So I
it's
am,
also,
oh, please go ahead.
yeah, it's also based on what their, how they were raised and what they expect and what they were raised on food wise.
Correct.
I wrote a clip a ways back about matzo balls. Okay. So if I go into it was about dealing with people on Yelp and their reviews and what do you understand and going, well, if I go in and I like light, fluffy matzo balls and they're heavy sinkers, it's a lousy matzo ball. But you might have been raised with the sinkers that are
Correct.
heavy and a light one is no good to you. So
Correct.
sometimes you have to take all that with a grain of salt.
Yes.
Um,
I will say one of my favorite food critics was Ruth Reichel. And she is one of the food critics, but also authors that inspired me to become a food writer and then a professional recipe developer. And I read her books, Tender to the Bone or Tender at the Bone, when was I in college or was I in high school? And I just fell in love with her upbringing and her food story. Her talking about how her mom, being so scrappy, would feed them expired or rotten food. And that just really propelled her in a really bizarre
the,
way into food. And I've always just loved Ruth Reichel's stories for that. And I've greatly admired her.
again, I'm going to go back to uh, Julia Louis Dreyfus. She interviewed Ruth. You should find the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I can talk to you. We can shoot the culinary conversation quite a bit, but I need to sort of wrap this up. So we have my final questions. You've been fair warned. If you wake up tomorrow with a new talent, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, I'd love to be a polyglot
Okay.
and just learn. I'd just be able to know instantly every single language in the world and beyond.
You're my first. I want to be a polyglot. Okay. All right. If you could go back and give, not that it's that far back, go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
It's okay to ask for help. You don't have to struggle on your own so much. And I actually write this in the book. I write, my mother says I love to suffer. And I truly do. I wore my suffering and my struggles and hard work as some sort of badge that I deserved it more than other people. And maybe that is true in a sense, but that it didn't have to be that way. Also, don't be so afraid of spending money. It's good to save, people. It's always very good to save, and don't overspend what you don't have. But, growing up with a single mother, money was really tight. And I carried that on, I think, far too long into my adulthood, which only further exacerbated my suffering and struggles, which I really didn't have to as much.
Okay. All right. Your ultimate culinary fail.
Oh my God, I still can't make these darn things. Macaroons. cannot figure them out. They just always fall flat on me. And let me tell you something, Dara. I don't even like macaroons. They're too darn sweet. I don't even want to eat them. I just can't figure out how to freaking make them, which is what bothers
Macaroons.
me.
Yeah, they are difficult because you're
Yeah.
dealing, it can be your oven, it can be the humidity.
Yes.
Yeah. They're tasty if you have them.
They're
I've
cute.
tried it. But I don't have to have it. I'd rather have the um, things on the crushed ice with the mint.
Yes, the
I'm
beaches
going to
push
say Logan nuts now.
it.
Either or, they're all good. What's the best bite you've had all week?
Say spice or bite?
Bite, B-I-T-E.
I mean, listen, not to toot my own horn, but when I was at my dinner party last night that my wonderful friend Caroline Hatchett have plated through for me for Latinish, sometimes you try a recipe that you made and you haven't had it in a while, and then you try it and you're like, you know what? This is good. I am good. I tried my plantain upside down cake. That's a recipe in the book. I haven't had it in a while. Oh my God, it was so good. It was just moist and tender and caramelly perfection. I'm really excited for folks to see that recipe.
Send it over. Send it over. 2 musts that must be in your refrigerator.
Oh, I mean, I always have a bottle of wine or mezcal. I'm a mezcal lover, and I always have a bottle of wine, usually something from Ithaca, New York, or Bubbles. And then, oh gosh, I know this sounds so boring, but I always have almond milk in there, and everything else is like a rotating, train station.
Okay. There's no right or wrong answer on this. You're not going to get flunk for anything that you say.
I know it's not that exciting, just a girl with some almond milk and some alcohol in her fridge.
And the last question, what didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
Are you reading my brain, Dara? I'm not even going to lie to you. That is exactly what I always ask every person that I interview. In the thousands of interviews I've ever given, I always ask that. And it really warms my heart that you're asking me that. No, it's not anything that you didn't ask me. It's more of for folks watching or watching later, I really hope that you give this book a chance, not just because I'm here on Dara's show talking to y'all, but, for other accolades and reasons. It's a good book. Latinish, it's the first of its kind. It's all about American Latino cuisine, and it probably has a recipe from where you are or where you have lived that will touch your heart and your family. Not to mention, it was also an editor's pick for Amazon's best cookbooks. It's on Epicure's list of best cookbooks, Forbes list of best cookbooks. So, other people.
And the top 10 from Book Riot.
That's right. So other people are saying good things about it. Don't just take it from me.
Marisel, a joy, continued success, and I hope one day our paths will cross. I'm not sure I'm going to make it to DC for your book launch, but I am enjoying reading it and hope other people will get into it, especially us cookbook collectors and lovers who read it page to page like a novel.
That's right.
Isn't that funny? There's your book.
That's right. I got an advanced copy of my own book.
Yeah. Marisel, all the best. Thank you so much for being on the show and continued success. And I have a couple announcements to make. And Jen will take you out. No need to hit any buttons here. Thank you. All right, everyone. Next week's guest, wasn't Marisel adorable? Next week's guest is Michelin-starred chef Anita Lowe, who for 17 years was top toke at a Nisa restaurant in New York City, receiving prestigious 3 stars from the New York Times and maintaining her Michelin star for 9 consecutive years until she decided to pursue her next adventure. She closed Nisa. Her current endeavor is leading international food tours with Tour de Forks. That's TOURDEFORKS.com. Check that out. Her second book, Solo, Easy Sophisticated Recipes for a Party of One, and her first cookbook, Cooking Without Borders, highlights her passion for bringing multicultural flavors to her American kitchen, both bestsellers. You might recognize her as a former participant of the season 1 of Top Chef Masters, where she finished 4th out of 24 chefs and an Iron Chef winner. And if you were really, really lucky, you were able to dine at Anissa before Chef Lo moved on to other endeavors. In 2015, Chef Lo was the first female guest chef to cook for a state dinner at the White House under the Obama administration. She prepared a 4-course meal for the visiting Chinese president and his wife. Tune in next week. You have to hear Chef Lo. I am always free, so please feel free to reach out to me via my email, food@jmoreliving.com, or my Instagram @DaraCooks. And on Facebook, I do have the Food Enthusiast page, so you can follow me there. All shows are immediately archived in video form on JMOR's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. We truly appreciate it when you share our show with friends and family. Feel free to go back into our archives and enjoy past shows. May your plates always, always remain full. See you next